All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into something, well, kind of unusual.
That's right.
Fungus in wastewater.
You got it.
You might be thinking, wait, what? But stick with us, because this is actually pretty fascinating and pretty important.
Yeah, it is.
We're talking about Candida auris,
Right.
a type of fungus that's causing a lot of problems for healthcare workers around the world.
Absolutely. And it's been designated as a priority fungal pathogen by the World Health Organization
Wow.
and an urgent threat by the CDC.
So serious stuff. And here's another thing about Candida auris.
Yeah.
It's super tough. It can survive on surfaces, and it resists a lot of the usual disinfectants.
It really does.
But don't worry, we're not trying to scare you. We're here to explore a new study that could help us keep track of this threat using something called wastewater surveillance.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're looking at a paper that came out in 2023 in the journal Environmental Science and Technology.
Okay.
And the researchers in this study focused on the Las Vegas metropolitan area, which has seen outbreaks of Candida auris in a number of their healthcare facilities.
So really a real-world investigation here.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're trying to answer a few questions.
Okay.
First, can we actually use wastewater to keep tabs on this tiny troublemaker?
Right.
What did scientists learn about Candida auris that's living in our wastewater?
Okay.
And maybe the most important question is, what does all of this mean for public health?
Great questions.
So first, why is Candida auris such a big problem?
Well, Candida auris is what we call an opportunistic fungal pathogen,
Okay.
which basically means that it can cause some really serious infections, especially in people who are already vulnerable,
I see.
like people in hospitals or
Yeah.
those with weakened immune systems.
Makes sense.
And it's becoming a bigger and bigger concern globally because it has high mortality rates, it's resistant to a lot of the antifungal medications, and it has this uncanny ability to stick around in healthcare environments.
It really does seem to linger. The study mentions how hardy this fungus is, and it's kind of unsettling. What kind of surfaces are we talking about here?
Well, it can survive on both dry and moist surfaces for a surprisingly long time.
Wow.
So we're talking about furniture equipment, floors, doorknobs, sinks. They even found it on cloth lanyards.
Cloth lanyards.
Yeah, and on top of all of that, it's resistant to many of the disinfectants that we typically use.
Okay. That is disturbing. It sounds like it's really difficult to get rid of.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why this new research into wastewater surveillance is so interesting.
Right, because if we could actually track it in the wastewater,
Yeah,
we could maybe start ahead of these outbreaks.
precisely. It's a similar idea to how we used wastewater surveillance to track COVID-19.
Oh, interesting.
The thinking is that if you analyze wastewater, you can actually find pathogens that are shed by people in the community even before they show any symptoms.
So instead of waiting for people to get sick and then go to the doctor,
Right.
we could actually pick it up in the wastewater first.
Uh-huh.
That feels like a total game changer for public health.
I think so. Wastewater surveillance has a lot of advantages.
Okay.
It can give us a snapshot of what's circulating in a whole community. It can help us detect outbreaks earlier, and it can even be more cost-effective than individual testing.
So let's get into the details of this Nevada study. What exactly did the researchers do? And more importantly, what did they find?
Okay, so the researchers gathered wastewater samples from 7 different sewer sheds.
Sewer sheds.
Yeah, basically areas of land where all of the wastewater drains to one central point.
Got it.
And they did this in the Las Vegas area over a period of 10 weeks.
Okay.
Then they used a specific genetic test called qPCR to find and measure Candida auris DNA in the solid part of the wastewater.
You know, I don't know much about qPCR. Is that a common technique? Did they pick it specifically for this fungus?
qPCR, which stands for quantitative polymerase chain reaction,
Okay.
is a very sensitive technique that's used to amplify and detect specific DNA sequences.
Interesting.
It's become really important for detecting pathogens.
I see.
And in this particular case, it allowed the researchers to not only find the presence of Candida auris DNA, but also measure how much of it was in each sample.
And this is the first study to measure Candida auris in wastewater, right? That seems like a pretty big deal for public health.
It is a big deal. And what they found was pretty interesting.
Okay.
They detected Candida auris in 79% of the wastewater samples they analyzed.
79%. Wow. I was expecting maybe a few samples would come back positive. That seems really high.
It is. And it gets even more interesting. The sewer sheds with healthcare facilities that had active Candida auris outbreaks actually had a much higher detection frequency,
Oh, wow.
94%, compared to just 20% in the sewer sheds without known cases.
So a huge difference.
Yes. And this strong connection suggests that wastewater surveillance could be really useful for tracking how this fungus spreads.
So we're seeing this potentially dangerous fungus in a lot of the samples, and it's especially concentrated in areas where we know there are outbreaks.
Okay, I'm starting to see how valuable wastewater surveillance could be. Exactly. And that brings us to the implications of these findings. What does this mean for the average person?
Well, if wastewater surveillance can actually track Candida auris, we could completely change how we find and respond to outbreaks.
Imagine being able to pinpoint a potential outbreak before it even spreads widely in a hospital or a community.
Yeah.
That's what this approach could offer. We could potentially step in a lot earlier and protect vulnerable populations and stop this dangerous fungus from spreading further.
That's an amazing thought. But I'm guessing there are some challenges and limitations to this approach as well, right? You're right, it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Every new technology comes with limitations. What are some of the challenges that researchers are facing when it comes to using wastewater surveillance for Candida auris?
Well, one thing is that even though this study showed a strong link between wastewater detection and those outbreaks in healthcare facilities, we still need to do more research to really understand how the amount of Candida auris in wastewater matches up with the number of cases in the community.
So just because we see a lot of Candida auris DNA in the wastewater,
Right. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a big outbreak happening at that exact moment.
exactly, we need to figure out just how much of this fungus is shed by people who are infected
Uh-huh.
to really understand what the wastewater data means.
Okay.
And that shedding can vary depending on how serious the infection is and whether someone is actually sick or just carrying the fungus without any symptoms.
That makes sense. It sounds like there are a lot of different factors that could affect how much of it shows up in the wastewater.
There are. And that's why we need more research to make wastewater surveillance a really reliable tool for tracking Candida auris.
Okay, so more research is definitely needed.
Mm.
But even with those limitations, this study still seems like a really big step forward.
I agree. And what's really exciting is that if Candida auris can be detected in wastewater,
Yeah.
it opens up all sorts of possibilities for tracking other emerging threats as well.
Now that's where things get really interesting. So we're already using wastewater to keep tabs on COVID-19.
But a fungus? This is next level stuff. What other kinds of things could we track this way?
Well, we could potentially use wastewater surveillance to monitor antimicrobial resistance
Okay.
as a whole. I mean, we know that bacteria are becoming resistant to more and more drugs,
Mm-hmm.
which is a huge problem for public health.
Absolutely.
But imagine if we could see how these resistant bacteria are spreading through a community just by looking at what's in the sewers.
So instead of just reacting to outbreaks after they happen,
Yeah,
we could actually see them coming and get ahead of them.
exactly. We could get a much better sense of how common resistance is,
Right.
see which areas are hit the hardest, and even monitor how well different interventions are working to reduce that resistance.
So instead of waiting for people to get sick and possibly spread these resistant infections,
Yeah,
we could see those warning signs in the wastewater and take action a lot sooner.
precisely. And that's not all. We could apply this technology to other kinds of pathogens too. It's like viruses or parasites. We could potentially track the spread of new and emerging diseases, find those hot spots of infection, and even monitor how effective vaccination campaigns are.
Wow, the possibilities really do seem endless. We're talking about completely changing how we approach public health surveillance and preventing diseases.
We are. And it's not just about tracking the threats, it's about understanding them better too.
Okay.
By looking at all this wastewater data, we can learn more about how these pathogens spread, how they change over time, and how we can develop better strategies to fight them.
It's almost like we're getting a secret window into this hidden world of microbes.
Yeah.
A way to listen in on what's happening without having to directly test every single person.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this study in Nevada, while it focused on Candida auris, gives us a roadmap for how to use this approach with other tricky pathogens.
I see.
It's really a testament to how innovative science can be.
It really is. So to wrap things up, this deep dive has shown us that wastewater surveillance isn't just about viruses anymore. It's a powerful tool that could change how we track and respond to a whole bunch of public health threats, including this really tough fungus Candida auris.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that even though we've highlighted the potential of this technology, it's still pretty new and we have a lot more to learn.
You're right. We definitely need more research to unlock its full potential.
Yes.
But it's exciting to imagine what the future holds for wastewater surveillance and what it could mean for public health all over the world.
I couldn't agree more. It's a fast-moving field with some incredible possibilities.